Welcome back. Before we get too far into this course, we need to discuss what a GUI is, or GUI, normally referred to as a GUI. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about what a GUI is, kind of the history of the GUI, and what makes GUI development unique and different from what we've used in the past. So, just looking at what is a GUI, it stands for Graphical User Interface. And this is basically, a short way of putting it is it's desktop applications. It's things that don't run from a command line or a terminal. In this screen, we're looking at Sketch, which is a GUI for macOS for doing some graphic design work. And there's a lot of complexity in this user interface, but this is an example of a GUI. As for the history of a GUI, it's kind of because over time computing has changed. That's why it exists. So originally, you would have had something like this all the time. You would have only had text-based user interfaces. This is actually more of a fancy version, right? This is just my terminal, just taking as a screenshot. But this was the only way to interact with computers originally, when you had text interfaces and you didn't have any graphical user interface. Then we got the mouse. So with the invention of the mouse, we had alternative ways of interacting with a computer instead of just being able to type things. So when you can click and point around and it has that more tactile feel to it, then it makes more sense to have elements that you can actually go and click and drag and move and do those kind of things. So GUI toolkits started being developed, and this provides us with the jargon and the tooling and everything that we need in order to build graphical user interfaces today. So when you look at the differences between GUI development and other types of development, you're going to find that in text UIs, you have one input. Essentially, you have a keyboard, right? Occasionally, you'll find user interfaces inside your terminal that do allow for the mouse to actually be used, but let's just be more general here and say that you have one input. Text inputs are good for repeatable things. This is why scripting is so good, right? When all it takes to run a certain command is to type out said command, then having it be repeatable is great. And then they have kind of a functional, as in using functions, and procedural design. Versus when we're working with GUIs, we have multiple inputs. You can use your keyboard or your mouse. The visuals can be better. You have tactile feedback from kind of clicking things, and it's event-driven, which event-driven means something occurs and it's handled differently. It's not just a one-off sort of thing where we had with our procedural design where we run a command and it does the thing. So that really brings us to a close here with what is a GUI. And I just wanted you to have a better idea of kind of why it exists as it exists and really what we're talking about when we're talking about GUIs. GUI applications are just visual applications that you create for a desktop programming environment or any environment that is not a command line.